Hello everyone. Welcome back to the part 2 of Introduction of Macroeconomics. In this video, we were going to talk about the macroeconomics variable, its concept, and there are two variables, stock and flow. And then we're going to talk about the equilibrium, disequilibrium, macrostatic equilibrium, competitive macrostatic equilibrium, and macro dynamic equilibrium. This will topic which we will be talking about. So let's begin with the macroeconomics variable concept. लाइक भेरिएबल भनेको चाहिँ म्याक्रो इकोनोमिक्सले आफ्नो भित्रमा जे स्टडी गर्छ नि त्यसलाई नै म्याक्रो भेरिएबल भन्छ क्या। त्यसले जस्तै अघि हामीले सुरुमा भनेको थियौँ नि के स्टडी गर्छ म्याक्रो इकोनोमिक्सले टोटल इम्प्लोइमेन्ट, कन्जम्सन, इन्भेस्टमेन्ट, सेभिङ, जेन्डर प्राइस लेभल, नेसनल इन्कम, नेसनल आउटपुट, जिडिपी, जिएनपी, इन्फ्लेसन, डिफ्लेसन, यो सब स्टडी गर्छ क्या। त्यो सेम हो होइन। भेरिएबल जुन स्टडी गर्छ त्यसलाई नै भन्छ क्या। त्यो स्टडी गर्यो त्यो नै भेरिएबल भएर क्या। यहाँनिर चाहिँ यसको अब एक्सप्लेनेसन तपाईँले दिनु पऱ्यो भने कसरी दिनु भने A macroeconomics variable is a factor that studies the entire economy as whole. किनभने यसले पुरै इकोनोमीलाई नै स्टडी गर्छ नि त। किनभने हाम्रो माइक्रो इकोनोमिक्स भने के त, जुन हाम्रो इन्टायर इकोनोमी एज एन एग्रिगेट त्यसले होललाई स्टडी गर्छ इन्टायर इकोनोमीलाई। जसमा भन्दा भेरिएबलले पनि त्यो भेरिएबल स्टडी गर्छ। अब सब भेरिएबल स्टडी गर्यो भने अब पुरै त्यो एग्रिगेट पुरै इन्टायर इकोनोमी त स्टडी गरेको त भइहाल्यो होइन। सो इट्स फ्याक्टर इज द्याट स्टडी द इन्टायर इकोनोमी एज अ होल, simple, and including three total employment, investment, consumption, saving, and likewise त्यस्तै लेखिदिने हो। जेनरल प्राइस लेभल, नेसनल इन्कम, नेसनल आउटपुट त्यस्तै लेखिदिने। अनि अब यसको दुईवटा भेरिएबल, स्टक भेरिएबल र फ्लो भेरिएबल। स्टक भेरिएबल भनेको चाहिँ द macro economics variable measured by at a point of a time, and the flow variable, the macroeconomics variable measured over a period of a time. Like it changes over time, but stock variable it changes at a fixed amount of a time. Like के हो भने stock variable are measured variable, stock variable as a measured variable, स्टक भेरिएबल होइन। तिनीहरू भनेको एउटा यस्तो भेरिएबल हो होइन जुन चाहिँ मेजर एट अ पोइन्ट अफ एक्ज्याक्टली पोइन्ट अफ अ टाइममा मेजर हुने भेरिएबल चाहिँ स्टक भेरिएबल भनिन्छ। जुनमा हाम्रो के पर्छ भने मनी सप्लाई पर्छ, जुनमा हाम्रो क्यापिटल पर्छ, वेल्थ पर्छ। किनभने हाम्रो यो एउटा इट चेन्जेस एट अ फिक्स्ड एमाउन्ट अफ अ टाइम इट सोज एट अ फिक्स एमाउन्ट अफ टाइम। यसले के सो गर्छ, यसले एउटा फिक्स एमाउन्ट टाइपमा कति पैसा छ त, हाम्रो क्यापिटलमा कति पैसा छ त, अनि मनी सप्लाई कतिको हुँदैछ त, अनि वेल्थ कति छ, यस्तो सोकेस गर्ने काम गर्छ। त्यसले यसलाई स्टक भेरिएबल भन्छ। अब फ्लो भेरिएबलमा जानु पर्दाखेरि यसले के चाहिँ सो गर्छ, यसले हाम्रो इन्कम, यसले हाम्रो इन्भेस्टमेन्ट, यसले हाम्रो कन्जम्सन ओभर टाइम, यसले हाम्रो सोकेस गर्छ। सिम्पल। सो अझै क्लियरमा भन्छु, स्टक भेरिएबल द macroeconomics variable measured at a point of a time, the macroeconomics variable measured over a period of a time. स्टक भेरिएबल भनेको measured at a point of a time, अनि फ्लो भेरिएबल भनेको measured over the period of a time। र यसले के सोकेस गर्छ, यसले सोकेस गर्छ भने it shows at a fixed amount of a time, it shows over a period of a time होइन। सिम्पल, रेडी सिम्पल गाइज। एउटाले भनेको कन्जम्सन इन्कम र इन्भेस्टमेन्ट सोकेस गर्छ ओभर द पिरियड अफ अ टाइम। अर्कोले भनेको एट अ फिक्स एमाउन्ट अफ अ टाइममा त्यसले के सोकेस गर्छ, त्यसले हाम्रो क्यापिटलमा कति पैसा छ, हामीसँग कति मनी सप्लाई छ, अहिले मनी सप्लाई कति कुदैछ, र वेल्थ अहिले हामीसँग कति छ, यसले त्यो सोकेस गर्छ। र अब हाम्रो अर्को पोइन्टमा जाऊँ भने इक्विलिब्रियम होइन। इट रिफर्स टु अ स्टेट or a point where two opposite forces, which is aggregate demand and aggregate supply, aggregate demand and aggregate supply are in balance. In other words, equilibrium refers to the situation where where both aggregate demand and aggregate supply are equal. And disequilibrium, it's a situation where both aggregate demand and aggregate supply are imbalanced. It refers to a situation where two opposite force doesn't come equal, and it comes under the imbalance. It comes imbalance, and then we're gonna look forward to the other topics, which is its diagram. Like it has OP on the left side, which is price level, and bottom the below aggregate demand and aggregate supply, where AS refers as the aggregate supply, whereas AD refers as the aggregate demand. When aggregate demand is a downward sloping curve, where aggregate supply is the upward sloping curve. And here, when aggregate demand and aggregate supply intersect with each other, that's the equilibrium point for them. And yeah, it is denoted as E in symbol. Hence, the equilibrium price is OP and the equilibrium quantity is aggregate demand and supply. So this is how I do explain all these things. And let's go about the types of equilibrium in macroeconomics. Like we have three types: macrostatic equilibrium, competitive macrostatic equilibrium, and macrodynamic equilibrium. Let's talk about the macrostatic equilibrium. Macrostatic equilibrium is the equilibrium where it studies the two different opposite forces, which is aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Okay, in variable it study both of them. So here what it is like, here we have got the bottom below the national income, or we could just say the aggregate income, and on the left side we have got consumption and investment. So consumption and investment, we're going to learn about this a lot in the classical theory of employment, about the JVC law, and in the classical theory of environment we're going to talk about that. And yeah, it's really understandable if you had gone through that chapter, which I had already studied. And yeah, it's really simple, just three topics in that chapter 3. So it's really easy for me to understand this consumption plus investment point of view. So here it's like, you have got this 45-degree angle which goes like this, and it's referred as a y equals to c plus I. Y is aggregate income, and c is aggregate consumption, and I is aggregate investment. So, and it's a aggregate supply in terms, and then here we go like this through consumption. This is the consumption line, and right above that, there is a consumption plus investment, and that's the aggregate demand line. So when aggregate demand, and aggregate supply intersect with that 45-degree angle, like that 45-degree angle will already be the aggregate supply. So when the consumption plus investment POV, that intercept with the aggregate supply 45-degree angle, that's the main point, that's the equilibrium point. And the down below the consumption, that's the point below, where the consumption part is selected and the investment part is selected. So this is it. And now let's talk about the macro competitive macrostatic equilibrium. Like it's a thing, like the competitive macrostatic equilibrium points out to equilibrium 1, and the next equilibrium is formed where it studies the both of them. But in case of first one, it just study one equilibrium, because why does it study only the one equilibrium? Because it doesn't have the change in investment, right? But here we have got the change in investment and the consumption. So that's why when the investment goes up, the new equilibrium is formed, and when equilibrium forms, it do study the two of them, but it doesn't study how it is formed. How the equilibrium is changed from one point to the another point. Yeah, that's it. And yeah, to talk about the macro dynamic equilibrium, it study the process of equilibrium, how it changes over time in a flow. And yeah, as a result, like it showcases the changes over time. It shows the it shows the entire economy how it changes, like dynamic analyze, explain all type of changes that happens over time, and the part followed by the system and part the fall followed by the system over time in the moving from old to new equilibrium. When it showcase how the path is followed. Likewise, as in the second one, macro competitive macro static equilibrium, it doesn't showcase the path, it doesn't study the equilibrium point, how it is formed, the next equilibrium point, but here it do study that and explain all types of changes that happens over time. In the figure we could like just see in the on the left side consumption plus investment, on the down below national income, which is referred as Y, and the 40 of the angle goes like this: Y cos to C plus I, Y aggregate income, C aggregate consumption plus I aggregate investment, where it's a 45 degree, it's aggregate supply. So we know that when consumption plus investment, this is the aggregate demand, and with the intercept with the 45 degree angle, that's the equilibrium point number one, right? This is what we study at the macrostatic equilibrium. But in this point it changes a bit, which is it comes down to the next equilibrium point, because we already have that consumption plus investment down below. But when consumption plus investment it changes, that's the second equilibrium, it goes on the top of the consumption plus investment. So here we got like C plus I and change in consumption, that triangle shape symbol I, and yeah. So the just during the due to the change in investment we have got more equilibrium point. So it shows the it just shows that changes. And yeah, I think in exam I might be able to explain all this point. And I think this will be it for this video. And at last of the video I just want to say thank you so much for watching. But I would just want to recall about the stock variable and the flow variable. Like, first of all I want to talk about that once again, about the macroeconomics variable and its concept. Like, macroeconomics variable is a factor which studies the entire economy as a whole. It includes total employment, total investment, total consumption, total saving, national income, national output, GDP, GNP, general price level, etc. And its variable is stock and flow. Stock variable, the macroeconomics stock variable is measured at a point of a time. It's called stock. It's called stock variable. It changes at a fixed. It changes at a fixed point of a time. And for example, it could be like, capital, how much capital has money or a wealth at a point of a time, or a money supply flowing, how much money supply we have at a point of a time. And for the flow variable we got, the flow variable, the macroeconomics variable, which is measured over a period of a time. It's called flow variable. It shows changes over a period of a time. Like example we could take as like investment, consumption, these are the things where it looks up to. And yeah guys, I think this is it for the video. I think in our last video we had talked about the limitation dependency upon individual unit, ignores the contribution of individual unit, no change in price, no feeling of change in price, and yeah, heterogeneous unit. And the last one would be, different like, different effects on aggregate, and like its importance would be, yeah, we're gonna talk about this in the next video once again for the revision point of view. So this is it for the video guys. Till then, take care, bye bye.